Going into spring, we'd like to give you some things to look at on your row unit. That way you're ready to hit the field running. Starting up at the top of the row unit, let's look at the hydraulic downforce cylinder. We all know that we've had some issues with these wiring connectors, so it's a good idea to make sure this area is really clean. Please don't use any high pressure washers or anything like that. And it is a good practice to take them apart, inspect the terminals, put some dielectric grease in there, plug everything back in just for a little bit more securance. Another common issue I've seen going through the field is there's a clip on the bottom of this pin that holds the cylinder to the row unit. I have seen those fall out or break, so it's a good idea to inspect those in order to make sure that that row unit is going to be secure going through the field. Moving down to the meter, one really good practice is to make sure that our seal going around the lid is intact and that all of the fingers on the knockout wheel are intact as well, and the spring is in good shape. From there, set that aside, and then our bowl. I highly encourage trying to keep the bowl with the lid and the same row unit where at all possible. If you don't, it's okay, but you just want to make sure that we don't start creating any grooves inside the bowl or around the bowl in order to lose any vacuum. Then looking at the meter itself, we have our knockoff brushes. Make sure that that can move freely for any fine tuning, and that you do have about an eighth of an inch of clearance past the frame to where those inside knocker wheels are. The brush, I will tell you that if you leave your brushes in the row unit, that's perfectly fine as long as we detension them. And if you do that, you will have these brushes be frayed. That's perfectly fine. Before we put any seed in it, before we go to the field, just unfold the planer, run the planer with the mobile row unit run off. Those bristles will get back into good shape and you'll be fine. Just try to remember to tighten those up before you do that. Coming back to the closing wheel arm, it is good practice to keep this stored with the spring tension off, and then with the spring tension off, we can see if there's any movement in that row unit. This is also another good time to make sure that that closing wheel is running across the top of the trench. So the center of this arm should be in the center of the V system on that, so we get a good pinch on that closing wheel. Then coming to the gauge wheel. You want to grab your gauge wheel and make sure there's no loosening or movement in your gauge wheel arms. If there is, we'll just tighten those down or move shims accordingly. As far as the gauge wheels themselves, we want to create that clearance so when you grab this gauge wheel, it should rub or almost turn that seat opener. If it doesn't, we will create too much space there. Deere's minimum space is 1/4 of an inch, but I like to see those tires actually physically touching that seat trench opener. Going to the trench opener, the best thing you can do is grab you a couple business cards, put in between the gauge wheels or the closing wheels, and we look at that space between those cards. I want between 1.5 to 2.5 inches. Anything above that, we need to shim that seat trench openers accordingly. The measurement on that to replace is 14 inches. So if we get below 14-inch diameter on our seat openers, they do need to be replaced. Lastly, if we do have a no-till coulter, we want to make sure that no-till coulter is riding higher than the bottom of the trench to the tune of about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. If you have that at the same level or deeper, your trench integrity is really going to suffer.